Hello, viewers and listeners, mostly listeners, because we really don't have any viewers. But
we have a YouTube account. Okay, give us a little credit where credit's due. I love the long pause between the recording starting and then you speaking, by the way.
I want to make sure that, it's fully recording. That's all.
I know you say that, but I feel like you're just like trying to tease our listeners into like, oh my gosh, when's it gonna come? Because all these ladies are like, I love Justin Davis's voice and Cynthia's a bitch. Yeah. Go ahead. You can finish your intro.
To this week's episode of Marijuana Mind with yours truly, Dr. Justin Davis, and my scintillating co-host, Cynthia Brewer. And our wonderful guest today. I'll let you do the intro, of course, but Lorenzo McFadden rolls off your tongue, kind of Lorenzo McFadden. I could say that a lot.
I think that's going to be his new OnlyFans name when he, gets that account up and going. That's his pseudonym. So today we've got entrepreneur, co-founder, and director of operations for the Thrive Network, and one of New Jersey's first applicants under their adult use program, which was recently a positive change for New Jersey. His activism and advocacy focused around the importance and also the neglect of social equity. As director of community engagement for Prowess Cannabis, we have Lorenzo McFadden, aka Dr. Justin's OnlyFans pseudonym. So, Lorenzo, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm glad. Did I hit on some of the key points in your intro? I want people to understand exactly, what you're doing up there in New Jersey.
No, you absolutely did. It's been a long journey with a few moving parts, but I think you hit on everything as far as the journey with Thrive and mental health and the work that's happening there, and then kind of transitioning into Prowess. And then we also have our school, American Training Center, that trains and develops people. So they're all kind of weaved in and working together to hopefully bring about social change.
I love that. So you're bringing in like so much experience. So you're part of an applicant that is applying for a license to participate in the cannabis program, adult use cannabis program up in New Jersey. So you haven't applied yet, but you are going to, right?
Yes, we have started the application process. We are working through the, I'll say the politics that are involved therein, as far as just getting to that point. But everything is really queued up right now, and there's some exciting things actually happening as we speak, as far as community support concerning moving forward, and just trying to help maybe organizations get through the barriers that maybe have been there historically.
What are some of the barriers?
One of the more, I'll say, one of the bigger ones can be just the sort of the red tape bureaucracy, just working through who's controlling, who moves forward, and how that happens. In an ideal world, that's a very fair and equitable process. And I think we're working toward that world. At this point, there are still just, there are a lot of boxes that you have to check. And if you're not in a position, maybe positioned or connected to the right people, it's very hard to check those boxes.
It's so true, because everyone says in cannabis, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know, and there's not, most of the best growers that I know probably can't even participate because they would be excluded because they have a background, they have something on their record. And, but so your group is made up of a bunch of different, like I'm guessing entrepreneurs that decide to come together. There's not a lot of times that you see large, like well-funded MSOs that care about social equity and giving back to the community. So,
and New Jersey, did try to put an emphasis on that with this round of dispensaries that were opening or being approved. I think.
Do you think that's genuine?
Yeah, I think that's where it gets a little difficult, where I think the wording is out there, but I think it needs to go a lot farther to really encourage what we're saying we want to see, which is being able to see individuals who have been negatively impacted by this legislation to be able to now in turn benefit from it and sort of be restored to some extent. And I'm saying this as someone who was not negatively impacted by it, and I still see a lot of the challenges in getting in. And so I can only imagine what that looks like for someone who hasn't. So, New Jersey, I'll say the word is now that if you have someone on your application who has been negatively impacted by the system, that your application will receive some preference. That is our understanding right now at the state level. So we do have someone on our application who has gone through that process, as well as lives in the community that we're establishing our dispensary in.
Is this Camden?
Yes.
Camden, New Jersey.
Yes, Camden, New Jersey. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I was going to bring it up later, but I'm glad you hit on it. I wanted to know, like, what was the importance around Camden, New Jersey, specifically as a city where you want to establish shop?
Yeah, sure. For those who aren't familiar, Camden's considered one of the poorest cities in the country, one of the most violent cities in the country per capita, and has been that way for decades. So, I think it's an opportunity to now maybe turn things around in the community in a deliberate and significant way with the type of revenue that can come from the cannabis industry. And historically, I've seen organizations come into the city and there is an intention in place. And whether or not they're sincere in it or not, at the end of the day, they've often underestimated what it takes to get to the finish line on that whatever they're trying to accomplish. And often it involves hiring and saying that they're going to train and hire people in the community. But then they come back and say, well, nobody wants to work, or I couldn't find people to train. And ultimately, it's them not having a connection to the community and understanding how to just get to the right people who are ready to work and who want to take those steps. And I can be emphatic in saying there are plenty of them, because my school has trained literally over 300 over the last 2 years to be medical assistants. So the people are there, they want to work, they want an opportunity. And I think cannabis is a space that I think a lot of the people would love to jump into, because some do have familiarity with it and they don't have the negative stigma. So there'd be a quicker adoption of maybe learning the skill sets.
How many licenses are being granted this round, and like what are the stipulations in terms of who gets a license? Or is it for one dispensary, or is it a general license where you can have lots of dispensaries? Is it for one particular location?
Now, this is where it gets a little more interesting, because initially it was being sort of governed that way in the state. We started with, I think it was 6, 2 up north, 2 central, 2 southern, and then there was supposed to be another round of medical, which our group had applied for. And that ended up getting tied up because there ended up being a few lawsuits about how those were given out. So it kind of froze everything. And now what they've done is they've actually moved some of the power to the cities and townships. So they're able to sort of get it to a certain point in the process. And then the state really is the one just signing off at the end. So, the process looks a little different now, gives the local communities a lot more control over it. But I think you still do see some of the same challenges as far as the politics and different things, but it does open it up more. It feels a lot more accessible now.
I feel like you were right when you said, like, it's about checking boxes, but also that's kind of like the worst part about it, about diversity with some large MSOs. It's like they want a token individual employee. They have to open up a certain percentage of dispensaries in low income areas. So they do it just to check the box, not because they give a crap about the community that they're going into, not because that community specifically may have been disenfranchised by cannabis and you want to change that outcome. It's because they need to check a box. And that's horrible to think that but like you said, someone is going to give you preference if you have a specific group of diversity in your group. Does that piss you off a little bit? It makes me angry, because it's almost like someone could go out and get a token person to just be on their application and exploit that.
Well, that's what we're going to see, quite frankly. I mean, because when you look at what it takes to mobilize in the industry on any level, if it's cultivation, manufacturing, or retail, it's all very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
So to say somebody who's been negatively impacted by the judicial system and this legislation now has $2 million sitting around to just purchase a dispensary, no, more than like the only way that happens is that person's getting a friend or a token to be the front person, and they're providing the money behind the scenes. And either way, it's not really what was intended,
No.
And I think if there's not some sort of I would say maybe a small business loan application or some sort of financial grant funding that can be based on a sound plan being brought to the table, then I think it would feel more sincere. Because ultimately, when I look at a city like Hamden, I don't expect to see many majority minority owners,
Right.
and so it's and I think the intention was to at least have some of those. So, it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out.
What's the cost for an application?
That's a good question.
Okay. Now, right now,
Is it based off of expected sales?
I'll say this. When we went for medical, it was 20,000 to apply.
Right.
And they held that. And then if you weren't chosen, I think you got all but 2,000 of it back. Okay.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But just the thought of, again, to even apply, having this have 20,000 just to sit. And then there was another stipulation around the your account having, oh gosh, it was somewhere between 1 and 2 million. And so
cash?
we oh yeah, just sitting.
Oh, because that's what smart people do. You have a freaking bachelor's from Morehouse College, right?
Yes.
Okay, in finance.
Yes.
In your opinion, is that smart financial decisions for me to have $2 million liquid in my bank account not working for me?
No,
It's not
and the
feasible.
person that does is probably just exceedingly wealthy. And
Exactly.
not even thinking about it.
Or someone who does not make good business decisions but fell
Right.
into a bunch of money. But I mean, if you don't have it working for you, it's not
Right.
invested in something, if it's not in a good or a safe account, IRA, whatever. So with your financial background, does it even make sense that someone would just have 2,000 liquid or 2 million liquid?
No, I mean,
No.
not with everything that's been going on with real estate and
Yeah.
all these other industries. It seems like you would at least park it somewhere, to sort of a tax shelter, just to protect yourself.
It
Yeah.
rules out, like small community efforts or individuals, and basically makes it so it's only accessible if you have a backing partner who's not local, or someone, that has so much money that 1 or 2 million sitting there means nothing to them.
Right.
And,
Well, it's kind of like, it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like you could be someone, like he said, that maybe could get 20 grand together. Like you pull in everybody to say, listen, like we'll get it back if less 2,000 if we don't get the license, but if we do, it can be very lucrative. And there's your first set of investment, 20,000 from your friend's family, that's it. But then by saying you have to have all of this cash in the bank, why? Like that's not going to be in the fee, and you don't get to play with that. You're not going to touch my bank account. Why does it matter? And then that's where the big guys come in, because they're the ones that have that kind of money in the bank, and the smaller guys who maybe come up with the 20K get bulldogged. And it's just
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly what happens. And, or you'll see a large franchise like a Curaleaf come in. And, my understanding that the dispensary in Belmar actually was one of the most profitable in the country at one point. And I need to kind of dig into that a little bit more. This was a couple years ago, but when you looked at where it is in proximity, it's right near Philadelphia. It's less than a 40-minute ride from Atlantic City, and it was the only one in the area. So, they were able to really get a foothold. They were able to expand very quickly. And essentially, as new dispensaries come in, you're seeing their product everywhere because they're kind of at the top of the food chain with the cultivation. So, they have it readily available where others are just trying to get it available now.
Yeah, we've seen that here in Florida for sure. Just, delays and I litigation delays,
My buddy,
lawmaking.
I was just going to say, my buddy on our current application, he has an application in Florida right now,
Oh.
had access to farmland and was trying to work through the process and is very, very upset
Oh.
with the state of Florida right now, just because of the challenges. He said it's really, he's at a loss. I mean, and this is somebody who's, dealing with the attorneys and working through the process, and he's having challenges.
We are what the Florida, like, tell him we're sorry. Like, we messed up. Like, this program is so ass backwards and upside down sometimes. But I remember when we first started the lab that we would have a bunch of people reach out for LOIs because you had to connect with a laboratory before you could apply. And so they wanted to have this like letter of intent. And I'm like, we're sit down, start by meeting with all of them. And then more and more come along looking for LOIs. And we're like, okay, maybe we do a phone call this time, and like, it's hard to kind of take that idea and be like, they have not a chance. They don't have a chance because it's going to just be litigated out of their hands. And it's so close and they're so positive and they got a great team and they got, everything that they checked all the perfect boxes and they're nice and they want to try and play with pot because they think they can. And then, they just aren't going to get it. And I'm just like, how in the world do you keep your head up after stuff like that?
It seems like, if New Jersey or any state, not just New Jersey, was really serious about trying to give back to the community and empower people that, not only have less, but were negatively affected by, unfair rules, who primarily, are minorities more than anyone else for ages. Not only would they, not make these difficult, almost impossible things for people to apply, but they would have grant programs where they actually, offer, money that has to, that you can sit there and be paid back at, very, very low interest rates if you're successful, as opposed to making these massive barriers that are very difficult to obtain if you're just, if you don't have these massive financial backers.
Absolutely. And we actually, we just saw that with COVID. So we know it's possible, right?
Mhm.
Where the Small Business Association gave out loans that were, I think, maybe 2% or 1% or something like that. So the options there, it's available. It's just, quite frankly, how sincere are we about actually seeing it happen? And how much of it is just sort of just what we're saying so that the powers that be can sort of get it under control, and then it opens up. But by then, we're really all relying on the people at the top basically to get access to whatever we need. So you're still kind of under someone's control basically.
So in your opinion, because you've seen, how much has to go into this, that your team is being, putting everything you can, and the odds aren't in your favor, right? Like, you have to try though, because that's just the kind of person that you are. And if you don't, then you really can't complain. But I love the fact that you guys give a damn. And so you're going to try and go for it. But I want to know, in your personal opinion, what order do we need to do things as a community, as like an industry, to make sure that our efforts are spent in the best area? And I'm going to give you a couple of options here and you can put those. Because of your background in finance, I said financial help and banking being significant, legalization efforts, decriminalization, social equity, addressing incarcerated individuals. What do you think out of those is the most important thing we should be focusing on as an industry? I can go through the list again.
Was there an all of the above?
Yeah, that's what I was about. It's so hard
these are my tops right here, like legalization efforts, decriminalization efforts, financial and banking, social equity, addressing incarcerated individuals. So these are they aren't in order. These are just what I think we have to focus on. What out of this list do you think should be number one? What do you think we should do first?
I would probably look at the social equity, because to me that encapsulates a lot, and I think that allows us to look at it from a multi-layered standpoint, which I think is important, because I do believe some of the problems we run into is looking at sort of that surface level problem and not really realizing sort of what was happening behind the scenes, or, and I mean, we can even relate that to the war on drugs and kind of how that played out, who was impacted by it, what was really the end result, why did we really see a drop in crime? There's,
Right.
but instead of just saying, oh, well, more people were locked up for doing bad things. Well, no, it was a lot more complicated than that. And now we're actually trying to rectify a system that was in place and still is to some extent. So, for me, just being able to take that look really at multiple levels, be it around even incarceration and how that's not fairly handled with different groups and for different crimes, or if it's looking at really the education systems in different communities and how you can, or how at one point you had prisons being put in communities based on 3rd and 4th grade test scores. To me, if you're able to see that as an indicator of what's coming, then let's look at the problem and say, okay, let's figure out then how maybe to get something else in there instead of a prison that gives those children a future.
That makes me really upset to hear that that's a thing. Did you know that, Justin?
No.
Thank you for your input.
No, I didn't know that. I
didn't know that. I mean,
my
that's
eyes got
really
wide when you said
upsetting.
that. It is. It seems like the decriminalization part is really just even a sub part of social equity. Like it goes hand in hand.
I don't think it is, because I'll tell you why. I feel like these are all separate, although you and I and Lorenzo all think that it's everything that we listed was necessary. Of course it's necessary. But when you think about the politicking, okay, of this situation, I think bipartisan, like across the aisle support, it's going to come with financial and banking. That's it. Because it doesn't matter, blue, red, purple, whatever you are, the ability to take legitimate funds that were earned, tax money that's generated can go into a safe bank, but the people that gave it to you can't. So I think that's something bipartisan support will push through pretty fast. Legalization is going to take a while. Decriminalization, like just, not letting everyone just have it, but just not punishing them if they do, kind of thing, maybe could happen. But everybody seems to have a soapbox when it comes to addressing incarcerated.
But that burns, that really gets to me, because you have these companies, these billion-dollar companies that are investing, they're trading it on the stock market in Canada, for God's sake. And so you have all these people, I've taken so many tours of these dispensaries in Florida, and they're so proud to show you that they have, just millions of plants and roomfuls of curing cannabis. And then there's people that are sitting in jail, or being arrested for smoking a joint. And so that it kills me.
Well, that you used a word, Lorenzo, that I really like, and I'm probably just going to start using it as my own, but I like the fact that you said we need to restore, people need to be restored, like that is something that really resonates, because, some markets have said you have to employ someone who was once incarcerated. Wow. Okay. That's big. That's actually like making it mandatory. Some markets are saying, we're going to allow you to appeal your conviction. If you've exhausted them, you'll have an extra pass. Does not mean you're going to get out. Like if you don't do well in that appellate process that you are gifted, you could be right where you're sitting right now because it didn't work. Okay. Nonviolent crimes that have to do with cannabis obviously have been, talked about, but they're like, what kind of nonviolent? Like they'll throw RICO and trafficking charges onto, getting caught with like an ounce of anything. So, but the fact that we restore the community that was incarcerated and disenfranchised, I think that's a really good word to use as an example of what we have to be doing on our side. We have to pay attention.
No, I agree absolutely, and it's one of the reasons that Camden has been a focus, and that community has taken the position that they do want to see someone who was hurt by the judicial system around marijuana to be impacted in this process. So that our understanding is that is going to be looked at more favorably, and I am more, I'll say, I feel better about that being sincere right now.
Are there any other dispensaries in Camden now?
No, we're all at that starting point, and that's why I said it's really an exciting time, because
Oh yeah.
we're now seeing the swell of support from different people in the political space. So we know that the turn is coming for it to kind of turn the faucet on. So we're trying to be prepared for when I think they're targeting 6 for the city right now. So, we're just trying to be prepared and ensure that we can be one of those 6. They already had the land sort of divided out as far as what could be where. But even when you look at that, that could be a little interesting, because of course, people who had land in those areas, like one of my partners, ended up being in a very opportune situation, because even if you don't go cannabis, someone else outside would look at your land as more valuable now, just because you're in that zone. Now, granted, that may change in time, but just seeing it was set up that way was not great. But I think overall, I can still look at the intention of having people who've been hurt by the system on the application, as well as seeing that something's going back to the community, which our group said we're going to do 5% off the top, and that's going to go toward really making impact in the community outside of taxes or anything else that's associated.
So this brings up, I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you are with our market in Florida, but we messed up big time when we were licensing, and we made people put language in places that was very strategic to prevent and create barriers to entry and prevent people from being able to apply for no reason except for greed. So to make it, quote, air quotes, make it right, we decided to acknowledge the fact that we did not create an open and free market opportunity for everyone. And so they were going to award a Black farmer's license. But you had to have a few criteria met. And you and I have talked about this. So I love having you weigh in, but the Black farmer's license had to go to a Pickford Glickman litigant. Okay. That person they didn't have to have majority ownership though. You just need one of them on your team. Okay. And then you have to pay $146,000, even though you were excluded from the first round. They only paid $74,000. So you're going to have to pay more, a lot more. And it's non-refundable. Non-refundable. I know. So try not to laugh all at once. And so pretty much you see, we never said you had to be a Florida litigant either, which was kind of a nightmare because we had people from outside the state and they were just kind of poaching litigants from the Pickford Glickman to be part of their team, not giving them a lot of ownership or equity, just using their experience in the past, and then applying and paying an obscene amount of money, more than everyone else, because we were trying to right a wrong. That was our attempt. I say our from the state of Florida. That was our attempt at social equity and diversity. How would you score us? I know.
I mean,
try not to laugh directly in the camera.
Yeah. I'm like, do negative numbers apply?
I know.
I mean, because it got harder. It sounds like, in the grand scheme. I mean, because I think I remember Florida initially, because I remember talking to my buddy about it and saying, well, wait a second, how many Black farmers are there in Florida that could really take something like this on? Even if they have the land and are farming, how many could really have the revenue even to jump into this space? And he said, honestly, as many as you would expect, not many, if any, and I said, all right, but I see what's happening down there essentially. But now you're kind of taking it to another level with what you're saying, because really to say, okay, in the second round, we're going to charge you more and still make you connect to somebody else to get to the finish line. Yeah. Really.
Well, to me, it's almost like it's incredibly disrespectful, in my opinion, because it's like, listen, we're sorry we messed up. We put all this very, very bad language in that prevented you from applying. So we're going to charge you some more, but we don't really trust you enough to do this on your own. Like you might be part of the litigation lawsuit and be awarded, but those litigants are like in their 90s. Okay. Now their family does get the opportunity to use that to apply. So that no longer matters. Like if the person that was awarded the litigation, win is like 85 years old, but his grandson or whatever is young and ready to go, then he could totally do it. He could justifiably do it and create a very good team. But they didn't do that. They were like, you're going to need to have a giant surety bond, and you're going to have all this other stuff. It's vertically integrated, so you're going to have to be really well funded. Really?
Right.
Okay. So you're going to have to go latch on to someone that's got a well-funded bank account, and you're going to be the guy that comes with the Pigford Glickman litigants piece of paper. Like, It's ridiculous. But I know what they're going to do is one person will get the license and the rest of the applicants will sue the crap out of them and they'll get a license too.
Right.
So I hope that they do get an opportunity to get ownership in these companies though, because that wasn't mandatory, and they shouldn't be used. But I want to ask you, why do you think companies ignore the importance of like a strong diversity or social equity program within their core structure?
I think organizations don't necessarily look at what a detriment it is.
Yeah.
I think it's more so just looked at as them having to extend or having to stretch outside of their normal process to now, take on additional expense to try and bring on someone who may not be as qualified in their eyes. So I think there's a lot of that maybe thought process in place already, but then I also think that it's again multi-layered, because then you have to look at education systems across the country and in certain communities and how people are being prepared for those opportunities as well, and figuring out how the outreach can take place. So occasionally you'll have a larger corporation, they'll come into a city and they'll try to do programs specifically with those high school students or college students to try to make that connection. And I think those are the types of programs that help, because it kind of bridges that gap. It takes that child that may have been working at, let's say, McDonald's or retail. Now they may be able to work at maybe a car maker like a Subaru who's in Camden or something like that, or a Campbell Soup that, could invest as well. So I think having just a pathway to really get really people trained well and prepared well, in addition to taking that concerted effort to look at it and say, no, I see the value in this. We really need these different voices, and it helps make us better by having those voices. And if we can get people to kind of look at it from that lens, I think that it would be very easy to see the value of it. Both all of our organizations I work with are very diverse as far as, top down leadership and, male, female, across pronouns, because we see the value in it and we understand that's the face of the world, and that's what we want to reflect and who we want to be able to connect to.
Your patients are all different types of people. Like, they're not just old white guys walking in the front door. Actually, very rarely are they going to be old white men that walk in the door. I mean, Justin, without divulging too much about your patients, how many old white guy patients do you have, like percentage wise?
I don't know. It's a pretty good mix of it's pretty representative. Although I would say that it tends to be the median age is on the older side overall.
Really?
That has changed over the years to some extent, but I still would say that the average person is at least over 30, but probably even over 40, for sure.
They are old white guys.
No, they're not necessarily men, and they're not necessarily white.
Well, that definitely like.
But it's probably representative of the demographics is probably representative of the general population.
I'm going to go ahead and speak openly about the fact that I was in a
But older.
dispensary 2 days ago, and I saw a lot of Karens. A lot of Karens were represented in that dispensary, like middle-aged, white, vocal, angry women were in that dispensary. And then the one that I went to in Daytona was a lot of younger, I would say younger gentlemen, and socks with sandals, which was weird, really weird to see that.
I think that overall you could probably say that I think African Americans are probably underrepresented in people that have medical cards in Florida. If you just even
I would
look
say
at
so,
statistically,
100%.
percentages wise of
Because of the
population.
cost of it.
Yeah.
I
I
think
can
it's
see that in New Jersey as well, because then you're having to renew, so even if you had it once, you might not after a year. And I think they're trying to change it to 6 months now. I have to look at that, but we were at least on a year cycle before.
It's
And
expensive to be a
you know,
patient. Like it really is. Like you pay your 350 for your initial, then your 75 to the state. Then you have to be very cognizant of how much you have in your allowance, because you can't take advantage of promotions anymore with the rolling count. So you're paying full price because you can't use the discounts. It's $100 a gram for like a concentrate. It's about $40 an eighth. And
yeah,
like,
there's a lot of barriers. Part of it is financial, both with getting in and being seen and maintaining a license and being renewed. Part of it is that the products are generally speaking more expensive than you would get on the black
yeah,
market.
I can get an eighth on
And
the black market right now for $20.
and then I think there's also just, social barriers, like just sort of generational mistrust and,
I think that's more in social intimidation. I feel like they don't feel like they've really had the avenues to ask questions. Like we're not going into different communities and educating them on how to become a patient. Like nobody's really talking about it unless you go up to a group and approach them and ask questions, or you're comfortable enough calling the OMMU. You can't just walk into a doctor's office and ask questions about the process because they don't have time. They're whipping out patient cards like this. The nonprofit groups really, good luck getting hold of someone. You'd have to go to an event, which costs money as well. So like just the questions, like how do I become a legitimate patient? If you want me to prove I qualify as a patient and I need my medical records, that could also be a problem, and then like it's kind of scary to go be put on a list with the Florida government as well. You feel like it kind of feels like a trick, and I
well,
wouldn't.
interesting you said that.
Oh yeah.
Because I did just read something, and I'll have to confirm, but around having a medicinal card and having a gun license in New Jersey.
Uh-oh. So we've talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast because we had Nikki Fried, who is running for governor. She's a big advocate for concealed carry and canna friendly. What's happening up there? Are they, because it's in the language here that they cannot cross
Yeah,
over.
and that's what I was gonna say. The language I read reflected that. Now, of course, I'll follow up with our attorney on it as far as how that impacts our business and how we need to look at that, or checks that we need to have in place around that. But my understanding is that they don't cross over, and but I wonder, when do they start cross-referencing those lists?
Well,
You know,
I mean, that's a good point. I
I
mean,
mean,
are they going to use this as a data set? Like, are they going to say, okay, Cynthia got caught speeding and she got a traffic ticket. Cynthia is also a medical marijuana patient. Medical marijuana patient speed. Like, is that what they're going to do? Are they going to say that if I went to a rehab facility, that's another thing. I went to rehab because I was struggling with addiction with something else. Are they
I
going
think,
to ask me, are they going to use my medical
yeah, I
marijuana
think that it's going to
legitimacy
be more
as a way of,
problematic
well, no, I really
if
want
it
to know.
becomes, well, I think it'll be more problematic if you're still required to get a state license and it becomes recreational instead of medical, because
But we're
you're
talking about
guaranteed
crossing
certain,
over the list.
I know, but you're guaranteed certain
HIPAA compliance.
protections as a patient that people cannot go in and access your records.
Right.
Whereas
You guys are in adult use now.
adult use, then the lines become a little bit blurred if you're getting a state license.
And
Yeah,
well,
so
and it's funny because even if we take a step back around just the access to the medicinal card, and a barrier in a sense could just be access to mental health services as well.
right.
That's something that's really a big issue, especially in the Black community. A trust of that type of service, as well as just having access, or if you do make the call, the probability that you'll get a call back. And I've looked into some of that data, and it's not very good, in particular for Black men.
Right.
So it's a situation where somebody actually gets up the nerve to take that step, and then they
Yeah.
make the call and they don't get the call back. And then you're back in this cycle of, okay, well, I wasn't supposed to have it anyway. Let me just call my guy down the street.
It's so much easier sometimes.
Yeah.
Because with the way that they change the regulations almost arbitrarily, and then you get there, it's embarrassing. It's like getting your credit card declined at a restaurant, like to go into a dispensary and get told that you can't buy anything because you've exhausted your per day limit. And I'm like, but now I'm going to be panicking because I don't have any weed. That like is adversely affecting me. So yeah, if I can't get it legitimately, I'm going to go get it somewhere else, because that guy's not going to ask me about how much recommendation flour I've got left on my registry. He's going to say $20 and get out. Yes.
Yeah, and the reason they
Much
knew that the
easier.
market was there for the industry is because of the Black market that was already there. They knew the demand was exceedingly high. And every state knows once this opens, the tax revenue is going to be tremendous.
Huge. That's the
So
only reason they really do adult use, is because they can tax the crap out of it, but they don't ever kill the Black market, do they?
No.
Because you can't. You could try, but instead they're like, we'll just make money off of the legal stuff and we'll just ignore the fact that the Black market has been unaffected.
Lorenzo, some people that are anti cannabis or legalization use the argument, and the reason I'm asking is you have a lot of you do a lot of work in underserved communities and training people for jobs. Is that what the Thrive part is, or the Thrive the Thrive is separate than?
Yes, Thrive works with mental health, primarily with
Okay.
young children and families dealing with trauma. And then American Training Center works with people in the same communities, but actually trains them to go back to work and provides different resources around them, knowing that it's often more than just the training.
So particularly with your work in Thrive, but also looking at employment, do you think that there is any negative correlations between the use of cannabis and mental health problems or employment problems, etc.? People are going to make that argument that are anti-cannabis.
See, and I think well, generally speaking, I would say that I hear more about actually the positive benefits of cannabis in the mental health space than I do negative.
Mhm.
And that's going beyond even just like anxiety or trauma, like going into things like seizures and things of that nature, where you have families really moving their children from state to state to try to get access to different things. So, I think there is there can always be a negative when it's associated to something being abused, I would say. But, overall, and again, maybe I don't want to assume that I'm just not in the network that's being positive about it. So that could be a part of it, even though I do try to listen. But I'm generally hearing more positive about it, because now when those guys, they're not going to lock those guys up anymore. Now I just want to relax. I can't get to sleep. Now I don't have to worry about, I can get it and it's not a problem. I don't have the anxiety of getting it and then trying to come down from it. So I think there's a lot of benefits that are being looked at in contrast to the maybe those negative elements. But I do think they are going to have to dig into at some point how law enforcement is going to manage it. I think that's going to come into play very soon. And I'm just really curious about the methodology of that.
It's gonna get messed up.
Is
I'll
cannabis
predict the future.
is cannabis quote unquote a gateway drug, as some people claim?
I don't agree with that.
I don't
Mhm.
agree with that either.
Well, I
but
feel like
it's
you have a
gateway
lot
to
of
more
expertise
cannabis.
in this field, just
Yeah.
with your background and who you have worked with.
Yeah, I don't see it that way. I think it maybe could be for someone. I won't say that it can't be that way for anyone, but for the most part, what I'm finding is that you'll have people that sit in that zone. They're
Yeah,
not
like
jumping to cocaine, or they're not jumping to crack, or they're not jumping to heroin. Now you do have some that have that experience,
they have an
and
addictive personalities. They were gonna do it regardless.
right, or they may have been exposed young as well, and that type of curiosity, you're cognitively, you're maybe not thinking as well, so
Yeah.
you're growing and you're developing, and so as you're exposed to something new, there's this excitement around it that maybe if you were 25 or 27, it may not have had that same impact. So I do think some of it is exposure, but overall I wouldn't say that that's the case.
Yeah, plus I tried like harder stuff before I was cool with cannabis. So if anything, like there's other stuff that's a gateway. I'm just saying
I would think that
it's such a dumb statement because everybody's like, oh, if you smoke the reefer, just like the propaganda, the racist and the misinformed propaganda from back in the day, those posters, which I actually framed and put down the hallway of the lab in Gainesville. It's like it shows like a hypodermic needle and it shows a girl with half her clothes on and she's draped over her crying couch and there's a guy that looks like Satan and it's like the devil's harvest and like it makes good girls go bad, but you don't mainline cannabis. Okay, that's a scare tactic. You don't put a skull and crossbones because you can't die from cannabis. That's a scare tactic. I think no matter what, people always want to try the stuff you're not supposed to try, and they will. And if they want to try other stuff, they're going to. It doesn't matter what you did first. And usually it's not cannabis first.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I believe that alcohol, for example, is much more addictive than cannabis. Really has almost no positive attributes behind a little social, besides a
I
little
was about to
social
say you
liquidity.
dance better, Mr. Davis,
Yeah, that's
after a
true.
couple of cocktails.
Well,
No,
that's true, and that's probably much more of a gateway drug to anything else.
I
That
think alcohol
cannabis.
has ruined more lives than cannabis has.
Absolutely.
However, you can't be arrested. Like if you talk about the disenfranchised, cannabis has ruined more lives than alcohol because
Mhm.
alcohol was legal. I think that we need to talk about prowess. We were able to fill up a quick hour, but I want you to be able to talk about the company. So in the event, when the event happens of you getting awarded a license, because I want to stay super positive, your team is applying and you're very, very excited about that opportunity. When you get a license, okay, what is the basis of your business program? What are you going to really focus on? I know you talked about Camden, I know you talked about social equity, but what's the first step?
Well, see, we had to change that plan a little bit because
Okay.
initially we were definitely a vertical integration model in a sense. And what happened in the city is they kind of said, okay, you can cultivate here, you can manufacture here, you can do retail here. So, and just so happened the land that my friend has is in the space where they can do, where we can do manufacturing.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
we're kind of starting in that zone, but we are going to have some conversations very quickly around how we can now look at the next steps and see, because his footprint is large enough to where we should be able to look at that pretty easily. So, we are going to kind of push for that. And then we have another area in the city that we're looking at for a possible retail location. But one of the most exciting and biggest things for me is, just that I have actually had a friend who, was for a wealthy white male, to just full disclosure, but who cared enough to say, listen, I said, for me, if we could, let's put a number on it and say, what are we going to get back? And for him, it was a huge thing to say, all right, listen, we'll just take 5% and that's just going to go into the community. And I said, that's it. That's what I need
That's
to hear.
awesome.
So now I feel like we can, I can galvanize the community. I can start doing some really impactful outreach. We can start advertising for opportunities as well as training to, help people, and actually open it up to people who have had incidents or do have backgrounds. Whereas in a lot of industries, you're really limited from that. So I'm just excited to kind of take that next step. I mean, because, the financial piece is, of course, great and securing, but it's the good work that we're really focused on, and having the opportunity to do that, because it's just the community's been handled and managed for a very long time. And we like to see some things open up and see the community really have opportunity.
Yeah, well-funded companies can fail, but well-supported companies don't.
Yeah.
So if you have the love and the support of your community and you're giving back to them, it doesn't matter if you weren't initially well-funded. You kind of have to be, but well-funded companies that don't give back, they can fail. They won't survive. I mean, it's a loyalty thing. And I think we've seen that across the board. When they start to mess up, people just go find new medicine. But once they find a company that's good and good to them, they're loyal to, a fault. They're the ones online that are screaming in the middle of the night about how amazing your stuff is and, defending you. But Justin, do you have anything else? I'm excited for you guys to apply.
Let me say it, when you get your license and you open your store, does it have to be vertical integration where you are only selling your own products, or can you sell, could you carry Dodie blunts, for example, if you wanted to?
I mean, so we would
carry Dodie blunts
because because we're starting on the manufacturing side, we would have to pull from the cultivators in the city or in the area.
That are actually growing, and not Marshawn Lynch out in California. That would be a federal crime. It's all right.
And I was tipping my hat to you on that one, Cynthia.
I love Marshawn Lynch more than breathing. I would invest. I would invest if he needed it, but he doesn't need it. I love Marshawn.
It's funny.
Lynch.
I have one of his NFTs for that brand.
You do?
Yep.
Oh my gosh!
That he released. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm a diehard Seahawks fan, and so yeah. Now you're family, Lorenzo. So you and I against the world. Thank you again for coming on. I'm so excited about your company. It gives me a lot of faith in the programs that are out there. There's still people that give a damn and that really want to do the right thing when everybody else is not. So I'm proud of you. I'm excited to see what happens with your group. I hope you'll keep us up to date with everything. Come back on afterwards and we can start slinging your products for you. And we really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
I like the name too, prowess. It kind of, for me, it brings like a lion, like the Lion of Judah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Justin, you're spot on this time.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, a little prowess. I can't do the little. I hope that comes through on the podcast and not like I'm gurgling.
That's like a baby lion.
Well, we'll have like
a
the little
kitten.
jars with the eighths. When you open it, it'll growl, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, we're sitting on tens of dollars, guys. We need to get these underway. Thanks again. Justin, your turn.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll be following closely to see what happens, and we'd love to hear any updates. When you do get your license, come back on and let us know.
Yes.
Oh, I absolutely will. This has been great. I've enjoyed the conversation, just sharing the idea. So thank you both for having me.
Okay. And as usual, keeping it green, keeping it lean.
Keeping your spleen.
J-Dog Davis.
As always. Davis. All right. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thank you.